All right, thank you, Renee. All right, we'll get started. Hello, Fadwah, and welcome to Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation.
Hello, Dennis. I really appreciate you having me on here. Looking forward to it.
I was thinking about this and having this conversation with you. You practice an art and science that goes back way before we invented medical schools and doctors. This is an ancient practice that you are bringing forth and continuing throughout all humanity. So do you connect with it through history? And I want to know what attracted you into this?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that attracted me into this is that sense of the fact that birth happens for all women through all time, that it is something that we are connected to our ancestors, our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, and on and on and on. And to be the one standing in the role of helping that happen, comforting the mother and receiving the baby in a warm, loving, grateful way is really why I started doing this. It's my passion. It's just in me. I really don't have any other explanation for that. When I happened to read Ina May Gaskin's book, Spiritual Midwifery. Ina May Gaskin wrote this book in the 70s, and that was a culmination of a lot of effort and energy for this group of people that took a caravan of buses from San Francisco to Tennessee and established a commune called The Farm in Tennessee. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I have heard of it, yes.
And along the route, you know, there was a lot of love, a lot of free love. It was the hippies, it was those days. And so women were getting pregnant and babies were being had. And Ina May herself had a little bit of experience. She had had a baby. And they just started helping each other. So one woman helping the next go through this process. When they got to Tennessee, they got the help of some doctors, and they actually established their own clinic, and ultimately were able to report on over 3,000 births that had gone so well, with a very, very low C-section rate and a very, very great numbers in terms of, you know, mothers and babies harmed. There were very few. And so it was really sort of stood out as a way that we can do childbirth that is supportive of mothers and babies and satisfying for mothers and babies while still maintaining safety. And unfortunately, our culture, American culture, and many other cultures in wealthy countries have not achieved that. And we've gone down this path of medical safety being paramount and neglecting the social aspects of birth, which are critical. In certain areas, you don't necessarily say the same things. For instance, someone's having a heart attack or a stroke. Yes, involving the family is important, but it's not really critical to the outcome of the event for the person that's going through the event. But when you're talking about childbirth, supporting the whole family and, you know, treating the baby with respect and love, it's not just a beating heart at a certain rate. This is a human being who is being born for the first and only time in their life. And I argue that it's an extremely important event for each one of us. And to be able to honor that in the home of the family, where we can do it how we want to, with dim lighting and the music of their choice, and the thermometer being where we want it to be so that, you know, it's not cold and things like that. It really goes a long way for the overall well-being of the family, the mother and the baby. Midwives have a saying that peace on earth begins with birth. And although it sounds a little bit trite, I think that it really, really is true
Oh,
that
yeah.
we can create a peaceful world if we start to bring our babies in a peaceful way, so that the first experience that a human being has is not one that's fraught with fear and pain, but rather being held and loved and being able to trust those around you. And I think that would make a big difference for our world.
I do too. There's just a whole element to it. Now, you have had children, correct?
Yes.
Was your first child a midwife birth, or did you go through the hospital system? So what was your journey? I mean,
So
you
my
gestated an entire human being. I mean, it just drives me, it just boggles my mind that you can actually do that.
that a woman can give birth to a baby, grow
Create,
and birth a baby.
create, grow a
Right.
whole human being.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. So with my first, I had started to read these books, and I had, gotten the idea in my head that this is the path for me, that my career will be as a midwife. And unfortunately, in that moment of my life, I wasn't very I wasn't a very together person. I was a young, naive 23-year-old, and I didn't have the resources to get a midwife, and I refused to go to the hospital. So I did what many are doing now as a reaction to what's offered in the hospital. I had a free birth. I didn't know that it was called that at the time. I just gave birth to my baby at my house with my partner. So I didn't even have a midwife assisting me in that moment. And yeah, there were, I talk about it now that there was an angel on my shoulder, that I was protected. But really, birth is normal most of the time. And
Yes.
most of the time, women don't need really someone there to support them, but there are instances when they do. And in my particular case, I believe that I had a pretty significant laceration inside as a result of an unattended birth, and I didn't have someone to repair it for me. So that was something that had to heal on its own. It took quite a bit longer than it would have otherwise, and this is the lesson I learned from that experience. And so while I have done births for myself without a midwife, more than one, my third baby was also a free birth due to circumstances. I don't necessarily promote free birth, but I will also help people who are doing that, who
Yes.
reach out at the last minute and who want advice or need some help with something, and I'm willing to go and help in the situation.
Now, within the healthcare system, so maybe you can give me a window into this on where the healthcare system and the insurance system and midwifery, where do they clash? Where do they align? And what can we do to be able to make this? Now, I know I've just opened a subject for about 10 hours worth of conversation,
Yeah.
but take a part of that, and that you feel like that it would be important to talk about right now.
So that's a really interesting question. And I'm going to say, this is how I'm going to answer it. When I first started my practice 11 years ago, I thought that it was extremely important for me to get in network with all of the insurance companies. I was coming out of working for a busy doctor practice in the paradigm as we know it.
Yes.
And they took all the insurances, and I really was pretty concerned that I wouldn't be able to get clients and make it in my new practice unless I was able to take insurance. So I fought, I begged, I wrote letters, I made phone calls, I hired a billing service that was supposed to help me get contracts. I ended
Mhm.
up doing most of the work myself. And over time, I did achieve many insurance contracts, including Medicaid. And for many years, for a good 8 years, I worked that system the way that they ask us to do it.
Sure.
It doesn't work. And I'm just going to say that it just doesn't work for me in a small practice, perhaps in a hospital system or a large corporation, doctor corporate practice where they have multiple providers and they have lots of people behind the scenes doing all the paperwork. I think perhaps it works in that system. However, the trade-off for the clients are, very little time with the provider and, just really, I don't know, I call it substandard care. You don't really get, the
Exactly.
type of attention that you really are looking for as a person coming into the health system. And as a provider, I can tell you, I spent hours on the phone. There was a couple of years there where I tried to do my own billing. I went through 7 different billing scenarios before finally settling on a company. It happened to be the first company I worked with that I had fired for a certain reason at one point. But I circled back around to them. And for my last several years working with insurance, they did a very good job for me. But there were still so many things wrong with the system. They didn't pay us anything near our normal rate, and we're not allowed to balance bills. So we're getting less than half of what we would charge for our services. They pay you whenever they feel like it, or they take the money back after they have paid you. That happens so many times, I can't even tell you. And it could be a year after I've helped somebody give birth before I see a check from the insurance company. I kept saying my mantra throughout this time was, I should have been a plumber or an electrician. So I do my work and I get paid for it. It's very clear, right?
Exactly.
In the healthcare industry, it's not like that because of insurance companies. So
Wow.
they've muddied the water quite a bit. And most people don't really understand all of it, the deductible and the co-insurance.
It's almost complex as a feature, so that so it puts blockages to you getting into. So how have you created your practice now? So how does your practice work now?
So about 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm stopping with insurance. It took me 9 months to get out of the contracts. There was one company that wouldn't let me go. I was like, I'm being held hostage.
Help.
So we finally got rid of all of the insurance contracts, and life is so much better, so much less stress. We're making more money, seeing the same amount of people. We're able to see more people because we have less red tape paperwork to deal with. And it's made it so that my practice can now actually grow. And we're looking into, we need a bigger space. We're actually buying a commercial building nearby. I'm in that process right now. So we're going to be about tripling the space that we have. We're bringing a pediatrician in to work with us. And I think we're the only midwife group in the area that has a pediatrician on board. And just looking forward to being able to add some other therapies like IV therapies and vitamin therapies, and even perhaps a shockwave therapy once we get our new space. So,
what is the shockwave therapy?
Shockwave therapy utilizes a type of ultrasound or sound waves to break up adhesions or scarring. It works well for things like plantar fasciitis and for other types of adhesive capsulitis, frozen shoulder. It can help pelvic floor dysfunction as well. And so I personally have suffered with frozen shoulder twice in my life, just coming out of an episode of it. And I'm pretty sold on that therapy as being one of the main things that helped me get better. So
Wonderful. Do you see midwifery getting a hold in our society? As we're looking at a very interesting time. Women are being, the women that I know and have been around are being told, certainly in the state, like I'm in the state of Texas, that said, it is your body, but our choice. Rather than saying your body, your choice, and how that goes. So you're in a state in the state of Florida. How is the state and the regulations in this, how does that align with your practice?
So it can be very difficult. I find that, it should be, a woman should be able to choose who she gives birth with and where she does that. So she really should be able to pick the provider of her choice and the place of her choice, whether that's a birth center, hospital birth, or a home birth. And unfortunately, it's not like that. With my credentialing, I could have hospital privileges, but hospitals are not allowing that because their bylaws say that I have to have a physician supervisor, even though the state law has changed to, and I have gone through the hoops to become autonomous, which means that I qualify as a nurse practitioner that does not have to have a supervising physician. And I should be able to admit and discharge from the hospital, among other things.
Sure.
But the hospitals won't allow it. So basically that means, for instance, I support breech birth, which is when the baby is coming with their head up and either the feet or the bum down and emerging first. And many women who find themselves at the end of their pregnancy, they suddenly find themselves with a head up baby. They suddenly realize they have no options. The only option that the standard of care is giving them is to have surgery to give birth. And
to actually have a C-section?
Yes, just because of the position of the baby. And so, and this is because our community at large reacted to a study that was done, that was poorly done in the year 2000. And several years later, some scientists took a look at their results and said, wait a minute, you included numbers that you should not have included, and you need to refigure the statistics on that. And then the authors did subsequently put, like, they recanted on their original statement that C-section is safer, and they said it's not safer, actually. It's a little safer for the baby, but less safe for the mom and the next baby. And a vaginal birth is safer for the mom. It's a little less safe for the baby. So, there is an organization called Breech Without Borders that is now trying to, go everywhere in the world, reteaching how to perform a vaginal breech birth, so that doctors and providers, they understand the maneuvers that might be needed and things like that. But in general, especially in South Florida, there's very few. I'm one of very few providers that are willing to help a woman birth vaginally with a breech baby. But that means that here's someone who's been seeing a doctor for her whole pregnancy, planning a hospital birth. Suddenly her choice is not only either have a C-section in the hospital or give birth vaginally at home. I never even thought about birthing at home before, much less birthing a breech baby. But if I don't want to have surgery, this is my option. And it's, I've helped a number of women in that position, and many of them have birthed very successfully vaginally at home. Or I'm able to turn the baby so that the baby is now head down and they can go back to their original plan and have their baby. But if we had more providers that were trained in breech birth, or if they would give people like me hospital privileges, then we could do these in the hospital, where maybe that's where the client feels safer. And certainly that's where the other providers in general would rather me do it, is in the hospital. They don't like the fact that we do these things at home. In fact, we help women who've had multiple C-sections. So another thing that the society, or childbirth in general, is always talking about reducing the C-section rate, because we've gotten to a point where it's quite high, and it's really higher than it should be. And part of that is there was a period of time where they believed if you did it once with a C-section, you always have to have another C-section. And it's funny because before that, they were forcing women to have a vaginal birth after they had a C-section because they thought that was better. But then things, so they've flip-flopped several times over the course of the decades. And now they are recommending the vaginal birth after cesarean. But doctors get all kind of uncomfortable when it's been 2 cesareans or 3 cesareans, and they don't want to do that. They want to cut again. So women who are in that position, they've had 2 cesareans or 3 cesareans, and they go to a doctor, and the doctor says, well, you're going to have to birth by cesarean.
Yep.
And they say, well, what if I don't want to? And they're not given an option. So that's where I come in. And I'm like, yeah, I'll help you. Of course, there are things to pay attention to, and there's risks, but they're low. And we will, our guarantee is that we'll be paying attention to all of the things that we need to pay attention to. And if we have any concerns during your labor that things may be going south, we're not going to wait until it's a terrible emergency. We will transfer probably sooner than later. So that's the risk. And we've had very good outcomes doing that, helping women with 2, 3, even 4 prior cesareans give birth vaginally at home. But
so how are you seeing the mindset of people? Are you noticing any changes? People are being more open and than they were before now, and how are you carrying out your wonderful practice?
So since COVID, I think people really started looking at the fact that they don't have to birth in the hospital, that there are other options. COVID made it really easy for us because they imposed some really arbitrary rules at the time. They were figuring things out. They didn't really know how to manage that. And so women were facing the option of possibly having to birth without their partner with them or various things like that. And they didn't want to do that. So women started looking into what else can I do? Where else can I go? And so COVID, there was a really big jump in our numbers, even though we're still like less than 2% nationally, I believe, of people giving birth in the community, and that would be home birth and birth center birth. So
Yeah.
we call that collectively community
2%.
birth.
2 out of every 100.
Rather than saying out of hospital birth, because we don't want it to be construed that in the hospital is what's the norm. We believe that going to the hospital is actually an out of home birth, because the woman has to leave her home to get to the hospital in the first place. So home is really the natural location for childbirth, in my opinion. Another thing that has affected our practice is the horrible statistics for Black women and our really high levels of maternal mortality and morbidity for Black women compared to other races. And so we get a lot of Haitian and island women and American Black women. We have a very diverse practice, and happily so. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that when I stepped out of the insurance world,
Yes.
I felt like it was really important that we are not just an option for rich white women, that we want everybody to be able to afford the services.
Exactly.
And so we started a nonprofit, and it's called Birth Equity Resource. We had a birthday party last April. We called it a family reunion, Midwife 360 family reunion. And we threw a party in a local park in West Palm Beach, and we raised about $12,000 for our birth equity fund. And we continue to try to raise money with it. I think last year, I want to say we helped maybe 14 families with donations of anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 to help them pay for their midwifery services. Because while we feel like we want it to be affordable for everybody, we also have to make a living. And as birth workers, there's a tendency to want to just give it away to everybody because you just want to help everybody, and everybody deserves this type of care and that kind of thing. But it's still a business at the end of the day. And
this is all part of our system.
We have employees to pay and bills to pay and all of those kinds of things. So I'm happy to say that that the Birth Equity Resource is a successful fund. And again, we're always looking for people to donate, but it has been helpful for quite a few families. So
wonderful. Well, Fadwah, in this last bit, what haven't we talked about that you would like to talk about that we haven't covered right now?
Oh boy. I think I want to say something about midwifery in terms of the fact that it is such a intimate connection that you make with your clients. And as my practice grows, right now we have 3 midwives. We're adding a 4th and even a 5th fairly soon as we move into our bigger space. And it's difficult to get super close with all of the clients when there's so many midwives and so many clients. And I just want to say that I hope that people in general, women who are pregnant, who are seeking care, take, you know, recognize that they have agency in terms of choosing their care provider and how close, what kind of relationship they have with their care provider, and that, you know, that's, it's a two-way street. So we do our best to get to know people and, you know, spend as much time as we can. We do hour-long prenatal appointments compared to a doctor's office that does 10 minutes. You know, you might get one question answered. And we do our best to try to get to know people as well as we can. But we hope that they also make themselves known to us.
So if I and my partner come to you, what is the first thing I call you up on the telephone and say, we want to make an appointment. What is the first thing that happens?
Typically, what we do is if you're coming for a home birth, if you're interested in a home birth, we do an hour-long consultation with you first to discuss the safety of home birth, how we work together with this practice and with the midwives, and the financial aspects of it, what's expected of you and what's expected of us. And then from there, we schedule visits starting around 10 weeks of pregnancy, every 4 weeks throughout the pregnancy. At 34 weeks of pregnancy, we come to you. We do that prenatal visit in your home. We want to go to your home at least once. We call it a home birth readiness assessment. We like to see that you've gathered your supplies that we've recommended that you get. And we want to make sure that our GPS takes us to the right place and we know the gate code, if there's a gate code to know. We document the Wi-Fi and the password. So when we show up at your birth, we're all set to go. We're not running around trying to get the Wi-Fi password or any of that stuff. We talk about like where we think the best spot is for the birthing tub to go. So that's all kind of planned out. So when we show up for the birth, there's not a lot of surprises. That's the idea. And then we see the client like on the same type of schedule that the doctors would. So every 2 weeks, starting at 30 weeks. And then once you get to 36 weeks, it's once a week. We will take your pregnancy all the way out to 42 weeks. At that point, we're talking about a home induction. There are things we can do to try to induce labor safely at home. And if we're successful, great. And if we're not, then it's a transfer to the hospital for something like that.
Wonderful. I'm so, one of the things that I love about you is that you are such a combination of the spiritual and the practical. There's a sense with many people that those of us who are into metaphysics and into that we're off in space and not, but you are as grounded as any person I've ever met. You are truly. I mean, you've got your practice and it works out. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to learn more. I was born, so I know it happened to me, and my mother, it was a C-section. So that was how it was in 1948 when I was born. And so now I love that we're getting a chance to people to know that we have options, and that there is a chance to know this long history of human experience and human science that is coming, that is collaborating with the kind of science that we've come up through the Western world, and they are not in conflict. There can be a compatibility there, and you bring that to us.
Well, thank you very much. That is what I strive to do. So I really appreciate hearing that. And I'm
Thank you
very
very much.
honored to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you, Fadwa, and I look forward to hearing about you and to doing. Thank you for spending time with me today. You and your wonderful practice and the grace that you bring. Thank you for spending time with me.
Thanks. Have a
All
great
right,
day.
good
Okay.
enough.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.
Oh, we'll have this up. This will be